pleasure to be talking to you today. I've got some slides that I'll be talking you through about what we were thinking about in the Office for AI in terms of the future of AI in the UK. It's a pretty big question, and maybe I'll just kind of dive straight into those and see where we get to. The future of AI is a huge topic, quite a challenge, really. And I guess my role in the Office for AI is quite firmly kind of focused on this question of how do we ensure that there is a future for AI in the UK and around the world, a kind of AI that we all want to see. I think the thing that we're aiming for ultimately is safe, fair, responsible AI that works for everyone. And that's quite a difficult thing to achieve for kind of any new technology, I think. How do we get from something that's at the very cutting edge and kind of, written about in scientific papers to something that is actually delivering real changes to people's lives? And obviously from our perspective in the Office for AI, we're looking at it from a public service point of view, so delivering government services. But equally, we are here to ensure that the environment is right to allow AI in the UK to flourish and AI businesses around the country. I should say really briefly that I was born in Leeds and grew up in West Yorkshire, and then went to uni in Sheffield, where I stayed for 8 years, or 8 and a bit years. And then currently I'm in London, but I'm looking to move out of London soon. But that's a very brief aside. Right, how do we ensure that we have future AI? How do we make sure that we have that safe, fair, ethical AI, responsible AI for everyone? We started kind of laying the foundations for this a few years ago with the AI review, which was co-authored by Dame Wendy Hall and Jerome Pesenti, and that review made a number of recommendations about what we needed in to support AI in the UK to flourish and the AI industry to grow. So one thing was that there should be an Office for AI. So that's why I'm talking to you today, because that was approved, and we now exist. And there's kind of 17-ish of us at the moment. We've had a few kind of leavers and joiners recently, so it's I think it's 17 at the moment. And we were kind of stood up as an official team between two departments. That's DCMS, which is the digital department now, and BAYS, which is the business department in central government. And one of the first things that we did was we put in place a sector deal. This is part of the UK government's industrial strategy to kind of kickstart certain sectors, and AI being one of them. We ended up with about 600 million from government and about 400 million from industry, and that's kind of a figure that's often bandied around of like nearly $1 billion, so 0.95 billion here. But actually, we've added to that over the years with different interventions on skills to grow that industry, which I'll come to shortly. Another institution that we've set up is something called the AI Council, which is a really important expert group for us that draws on expertise of 22 members from industry, from civil society, and from some of the R&D institutions, so some of the kind of leaders of those institutions. And then actually there's another institution that we work with quite closely, which is the Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation. They actually do advise government and regulators on use of data for, but not limited to AI, but in all aspects of data. That actually came from a separate recommendation from a Royal Society and British Academy report of 2017 also, but earlier in the year than the AI review that came out. Yeah, that made that recommendation for that organisation to exist, and it does. Now, this is a really complicated slide, but I'm not going to go through going to read all of the points here, but I will be happy to email it to people. I think it looks better on a bigger screen, but just to show some of the things that we've done in the past few years, and I'll talk about some of them in a bit more detail. So we've been doing things to drive sector adoption. So there's been a review of public sector adoption that we did with the Government Digital Service. There has been some work with NHSX, so some of the AI experts in the NHS. There's been work all over the country, and I'll come to some of those points later with some of the universities that we're doing master's programs with, including in the north, but also in some of the devolved administrations in the UK. We've been really looking at kind of R&D and science and technology reviews. So challenge funds as part of the industrial strategy. We've been some of the biggest things that we've done too that we've done since we've been stood up are around some of the mid-level skills. So kind of master's level, and I'll talk about those a bit more shortly too. We're doing lots of stuff on advanced AI skills to make sure we've got the kind of best and brightest, and that's kind of PhD programs, but also making sure we've got the right environment to attract some of those kind of best and brightest to the UK, where they might want to set up UK businesses in AI, we hope. Doing lots of stuff on thought leadership, and doing lots of stuff on international leadership as well. And there's lots of stuff here, right? Okay. But I think one of the things that I think I was watching the Michael Fassbender film again recently of Steve Jobs, where it has a bit where Steve Jobs talks to Steve Wozniak about playing the orchestra. And I think the Office for AI has a role in kind of playing the orchestra of lots of different levers in government. So just really quickly take you through some of these. We have worked on some principles for AI adoption in the public sector. I've mentioned these already. And these kind of looked at kind of the things that are happening across central government, agencies, and kind of highlighting the best work that's been done. That is available on our website, which I'll come to at the end with the link. One of the biggest things we've done this year is publish the final guidelines on procurement of AI in the public sector, which we did with the World Economic Forum. It was really important, and this is again thinking about how we ensure there is a future for AI in the UK, that we look to kind of the principles that allow responsible AI and think about questions like diversity, equality, and one of the things that this report, these guidelines, I should say, have highlighted is the need for equality assessment in thinking about public service delivery of AI. That goes kind of above and beyond kind of the baseline, and also lots of the time we have reports and recommendations from various government bodies, but we've been careful to ensure that this goes right through to kind of completion. So we worked with the Crown Commercial Services, which central and local government use, to make sure that there is a baseline ethical standard for any business who's providing AI services to government, to make sure that when they're onboarded, they are providing that baseline standard to deliver, public services to people. Thinking about equality, public sector equality duties, a key thing. What are some of the other enablers that we've been doing? So we have been thinking about how, what's the skills pipeline we're going to need for the future. We have been so for a while now working on kind of mid-level courses. Been doing some industrial masters work. One of the big things that we've actually got kind of embedded and implemented this year is conversion courses. The key thing here is not the conversion course aspect, actually. The key thing is the fact that we're offering scholarships to people from underrepresented backgrounds to enter careers in AI. So that's more women. It's Ada Lovelace Day today, as many people will be aware. More black people, more disabled people, and more people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. It's important to have diversity of thought and diversity of background. I'm from a working class background, and I think it's really important that we do have that diversity of thought in kind of in how these things are implemented. Just to continue this point, you've probably seen, there is kind of a bit of a focus on kind of moving away from this idea of you go to school, you go to college, you get a job, do not repeat, to something a bit more. You will take a career break, you will retrain. The Prime Minister announced a couple of weeks ago this whole kind of reskilling, retraining kind of opportunities for people. Primarily, the whole focus was on people who didn't have A levels, but there's loads of things out there for people. Also people already working in the public sector who might want to kind of up their data science and AI skills. We've worked with a number of bodies, including the Open Data Institute, on new frameworks for data sharing to allow startups and scale-ups to have access to data, which is obviously one of the key things that they need. We've been also working with the ICO and Alan Turing Institute. This is actually work that I must say actually that they've done the most of this work themselves, but that actually kind of setting the kind of tone for what's happening out there in terms of algorithmic kind of assessment and kind of interpretability is kind of very much part of the setting the narrative on AI that will allow it to flourish in the future. Some key things actually just want to bring to your attention to the viewers now. We're working at the moment so as I mentioned, we're part of DCMS and part of BAYS in the Office for AI. We're looking to the AI labour market to understand the skills relating to AI and data science that organisations need and the approaches they're taking to employing and training and the issues that they face, because this is all obviously important for the future. There's an email address there. We're actually working with Ipsos Mori on this, but if you want to take part of this in this survey, if you're an AI business leader, then we'd love to hear from you on that. So we've been kind of putting in place kind of principles, guidelines, some interventions, which I could loosely kind of term as enablers to allow the industry to flourish. We're kind of heading towards a strategy, and I mentioned this AI Council previously. The AI Council is looking to what we might need in the future for AI and kind of giving recommendations on that to us at the moment. But there are a number of other upcoming strategies. The key one that's probably the most publicly known about is the National Data Strategy that's kind of has been announced. There's a consultation on that. Again, it's another call to action on this one. There's a closing date of the 2nd of December. If anyone wants to take part in the National Data Strategy, we want to understand what some of the blockers and barriers are for businesses. Hear some war stories maybe, but I think anything around kind of access to data they would want to hear about that would allow the UK's data economy to be something that's more supportive of AI businesses. And finally, I've kind of rattled through these quite quickly, I guess, but if you want to be in touch with us, we do have a Twitter account for the Office for AI. You can also, I'm happy for you to DM me, because my DMs are open if you've got any questions. And we do have a web page as well that you can go to. But yeah, that it gives a bit brief overview of what we've been doing in the Office for AI to kind of allow a future for AI, I guess, in the UK to flourish as much as we can. But we're always listening to industry. We have the AI Council, as I mentioned, as advisors. One thing I didn't actually mention is that the Office for AI also, we're very lucky to have Demis Hassabis as an advisor as well, due to the kind of slightly complex history of the AI review and the way that was all set up. But we're very honoured to have him as an advisor, separate to the AI Council. But yeah, always happy to hear from more people about how we can make sure that we do have a future for AI in the UK.